What's up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with MetalTrenches.com, and today we're reviewing the debut Exanimis album Marionnettiste via Klonosphere Records. And hey, if you like to be kept up to date with the best and brightest metal bands and albums from the underground and above, then stick with me by hitting that subscribe button down below. Started in 2015, Exanimis is a French symphonic death metal band created by former students of the Music Academy International who set out to create a sound that merges the atmosphere of horror and fantasy soundtracks with the heaviness and technical intricacies of metal. The result is an album that rivals even the heights reached by the likes of Septicflesh, Dimmu Borgir, and Fleshgod Apocalypse in its collision of death metal and classical orchestration. Opening track, the Wrathful Beast, kicks the album off already with one of my favorite tracks with its very Fleshgod Apocalypse level of energy. Infectiously chugging, squealing guitars and imposing death growls are perfectly joined by very whimsical blasts of brass, strings, and choral synth. And what's even more impressive is that each of these elements works just as well on its own as perfectly woven together into the larger compositions. Even some of my favorite earlier Fleshgod albums suffer at times due to sounding overly dense and busy, but here everything from the perfect touches of spiraling piano keys to the hooky guitar melodies shine brightly within the mix. And speaking of which, sometimes these extreme symphonic metal bands, in all of their focus on the orchestral elements, lose sight of writing killer riffs in the process. This is not at all the case with Exanimis. In fact, the guitars take center stage quite frequently with not only really groovy and even sometimes proggy hooks, but also some absolutely ripping solos. In fact, almost every song has one, with Stampede of the 10,000 perhaps standing just above the rest with a particularly lengthy arrangement punctuated by some serious tapping parts. Flipping again back to the symphonic elements, there's clearly more than a little Danny Elfman influence on Marionnettiste. It's got that same kind of fairy tale quality to its fun bounciness, and especially the inclusion of the wispy, haunting, childlike chorals. Whenever I hear those, I can't help but think back to days of my youth getting caught up in the stunning atmosphere of movies like Edward Scissorhands and Batman Returns. Another personal favorite song of mine on the album that features all of these elements in spades is Cogs, Gears, and Clockworks. After a 2.5 minute and, to be fair, a bit too long of an introduction, this track turns into pure Carch Angren with its rolling snares, carnival-like guitar melodies, and especially the raspy staccato vocals. He's got that same hammy, over-the-top emphasis on certain syllables that ends up being very rhythmic and therefore quite infectious. It would be easy to call this a bit of a knockoff, but over the almost 12-minute runtime, Exanimis managed to apply just enough of their own little tricks to make it feel at least somewhat their own. Even if it were a Carch Angren track, I would call it one of their best. Cathedral is another clear standout in the track listing, it also being the longest one on the album at just over 16 minutes. See, I told you guys I don't hate long tracks, they just have to be good. This one is another very slow, creeping build, starting with an excellent organ intro and eventually very hymn-like adult chorals, fitting to the unholy church vibes of the title. It takes nearly 4.5 minutes for this one to really get going, but it's worth the patience as the build-up makes the sudden turn into very Septicflesh territory all the more powerful. Suddenly, it's deep, paralyzing death growls and big, lumbering, Titan-esque guitars alongside clanging bells and seemingly endless layers of atmosphere that are an utter delight to behold. Overall, I quite enjoy this album even if it suffers from some pretty clear imperfections. As previously alluded to, it's definitely too long and a bit over-ambitious in certain places. For the most part, Exanimis still managed to squeeze every drop out of its runtime, but I still think it would be even stronger if it were just a bit more concise. I'd even say cut the kind of sappy first few minutes of the slow flow of the spume on the shore entirely. Much more distractingly, there are some dramatic spoken word sections that probably could have been done away with as well, as frankly, they're pretty boring. They bring otherwise great tracks like Throne of Thorns to an absolute halt. This could probably work if the band just leaned into the melodrama of these moments again a la Carch Angren, but instead they end up being so serious and understated as to not be very interesting at all.
Dès que je ne lui serai plus nécessaire, une mouche suffira pour me renverser.
Even so, I think the pros definitely outweigh the cons on this one. Especially for a debut, this is a massive sounding record that delivers so many memorable moments and just a deep well of talent that comes across in every instrument and the overall production. I give it a 9 for enjoyability. Again, with just a little trimming and editing, this could easily be a 10, but Exanimis generally have me hooked throughout the duration. I give it a 9 for instrumentation, massive, ambitious, adept, from the guitars and vocals to the symphonic flourishes, everything has something of worth to provide, and does so at top level. I can't quite give this one a 10 either due to some of the slightly bloated songwriting arrangements, but other than that, this is top-notch stuff. And I give it a 7 for innovation. If you're as big a fan of extreme symphonic metal as I am, this is going to be very familiar territory for you, just done very well to the point that I can't wait to hear more. So an 8.3 and a B for Exanimis and Marionnettiste. Get it once more via Klonosphere Records. Alright, we also have a shout out this time for blackened thrash band Demiser and their new album Through the Gate Eternal via Boris Records. After dropping 2 positively received demos and landing a spot on the Blood of the Wolf Festival, this South Carolina group is ripping and tearing their way to the top with a sound very much recommended for fans of Venom, early Bathory, Skeleton Witch, and Necropanther. Demiser really deliver on the promise of primal thrash energy of the 80s with seriously infectious riffs delivered at speeds that should be outlawed. All the while delivering highly menacing yet often catchy black metal vocals and a dark atmosphere. I also hear a little Carcass influence coming through on Offering and the righteous Hook and Torment, while Deathstrike almost feels like an early Ministry track at times. There's even an acoustic number with the sounds of a crackling bonfire, so in other words, there's still room for plenty of variety amidst its venomous chaos. In any case, if you dig fusions of black and thrash metal, you're going to want to get on the Demiser bandwagon. Y'all, thanks as always for watching, and let me know down in the comments what you thought of these albums and what is your favorite symphonic death metal band. And also, hey, stick around, I got plenty more videos coming right after this one. I actually have tier lists for the first half of Septicflesh discography part 2 on the way, also for Fleshgod Apocalypse and Dimmu Borgir, and then more reviews for new releases, interviews with bands on the podcast, you name it, we've got it. So plenty of reasons to subscribe if you have not already. Also chat with us on the Discord and support on Patreon. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.